Thank you. And just as clarification, I didn't attend Harvard. I went to the Harvard of the West, which is Pomona College. Go Pomona College. In the last program, the speakers talked about weakness, and they kind of edged on this concept of fear. And as I was thinking about how I wanted to introduce this program today, I want to share with you that this is a little uncomfortable for me. I am stepping out of my comfort zone with this presentation. I speak around the country on the topic of personal branding. And I'm going to teach you some of those techniques and some of those skills today. But I was asked to come here and talk about this topic, which is why I serve you, why I serve those who have served. And it's a new one for me. So I'm asking and I'm sharing my authenticity and my vulnerability by saying this is a different one for me. I'm telling my story. And I never thought my story was something that was so noteworthy, but I guess y'all want to hear it. So let's get going. This quote, and I'm not a big quote person, but this quote truly changes the lives of people. Because there really are two very important days in your life. The day you were born, we're glad you're all here, and the day you figure out why. The people who hire me are trying to figure that out. They are typically very senior executives in the civilian environment, some former military, who are trying to figure out, why am I here? Why have I spent my career building this business, building this company, building this community or this industry? What does that mean? Why does it matter? Why do I matter? And as was talked about this morning, for some of you that are very young, you're possibly trying to figure that out now, and you might not figure it out until you're not as young. And it might come much later, or it might come when you're younger. But the day you figure out why you were put on this earth is a truly awesome and powerful and terrifying and authentic day. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, because I think it was partly when I figured out why I'm here. So I started my own business in 2008. I left corporate America, where I had worked in the civilian environment 25 years, which is shocking because I'm only 30. And everyone laughs at that. But I had spent my career doing what they talked about this morning, right? Chasing profit, chasing financial recognition, chasing titles and career advancement, and getting to the place where I had that business card and that salary and those staff where my dad said, "I'm so proud of you. You're so successful." And I was like, yes. Well, then 2008 came and the market imploded, and I was in financial services. And I was left with going to find another job or doing something different. And I decided in that moment to be an entrepreneur in 2008, with 2 kids about to go off to college. Really, looking back, guardian angels were working overtime. But I took all the experience that I had in my 25 years of working with senior professionals and leading brands, teaching them to be competitive and gain market traction, and I started my own company. Actually, it was fabulous. Things fell into place. It was really kind of easy. A lot of people said, well, we wondered what took you so long. Well, I'd never thought about owning my own business. And I wasn't a risk taker. I was a risk taker with your money, but not my money. So it had never really occurred to me. But in 2008, I hung out the shingle. I started Lida 360. My clients were global businesses and business leaders, and everything was cooking along great. 2009, in November, I was at a Denver Broncos football game. And if you remember the Broncos in 2009, not exactly the team we have today. And worse, we played the Steelers. So no wonder I got the tickets for free. But it happened to be the week of Veterans Day. And the team did a tribute to returning military. Well, at halftime, when they were doing this presentation, is typically when I would have got up and got my soda and my hot dog and made a few phone calls, things like that. But for some reason, I became focused on what was happening on the field. And I honestly don't remember if it was a Marine, I seem to think it was, who took the stage, took the floor at halftime and talked about how difficult his transition was. He talked about the many years of service that he had given to our country and how making the transition from wearing the uniform to taking it off was terrifying. He described the fear and the fog of that day when it came, when he realized he now had to define the second half of his life, and he didn't know how to compete. He didn't have the tools. He didn't feel armed and prepared for this next chapter of his life. And I looked at my husband and I said, oh my gosh, I can help. Like, this is what I do. This is how I teach competitive advantage. I teach people how to define their space in the world. And my husband looked at me and he goes, what do you know about the military? Because I have no military connection. No one in my family has served. None. So your world is as foreign to me as my world will be to you when you make that transition one day, which you know will happen, onto the other side. But I knew I was called to something, and I'm now more comfortable using the term calling. It was not an opportunity business-wise, because I had a brand new business that was just getting going, and I decided I was going to figure out a way to serve those of you who have served. I am the civilian that you fight for. I am the person that enjoys the liberties and the freedom. I live in a beautiful home. I travel the country freely because of your commitment. And when I started putting these pieces together, it became so obvious to me, but no one was talking about it. One thing I learned real quickly about your culture versus my culture is it was not very easy to work my way in. So I knocked on a lot of doors for about 6 months after that Broncos game. And I said, hey, I teach corporate programs. Can I come and teach at the VA? Can I come and teach at your veteran service organization that works with homeless veterans? Can I teach my program because I think it'll give them competitive advantage? It will help make that transition smoother. And everybody looked at me and said, what are you selling? Like, what's in it for you? I said, well, there's nothing in it for me. I'm doing this because I'm beneficiary of all this commitment and sacrifice, and I just want to give back. Well, the first person that allowed me to come in was General Peter Pace, who it turns out is a really good friend to have in the military. He runs a program in Philadelphia called Wall Street Warfighters Foundation, where he takes service-disabled veterans, at least 30 to 50% service-disabled, transitions them into Wall Street jobs. Well, that was great. I had a background in finance. It was a perfect fit. So I marched off to Philadelphia for the first training class with my corporate program, right, because this can't be much different. We all speak the same language. We look the same. And I walked into the first class, and I had 4 double amputees, 3 gentlemen with severe traumatic brain injury, and the first person that met me had most of his face gone from an IED explosion. And this civilian from Denver, Colorado went, this is different. This is really different. But I was hooked. And actually, a lot of the people in that first class are really good friends of mine today. In the past 5.5 years, I've kind of taken this a little bit further. So I continue to work with General Pace's program. I do write for military.com, which, as you probably know, is one of the largest websites for the military. I have been featured nationally and actually internationally for the concept that I'm going to share some of with you today, which is personal branding. What you need to start thinking about today, even though you're cadets, because one day you know that uniform will come off. It will. And being able to think about what it's going to require at that day now is a huge advantage. I have counseled personally hundreds of veterans. I make myself available. If somebody calls me or emails me and says, I need some help, I find the time. And I have done that for the past 5.5 years. I speak at military installations for active duty. I teach here at the Transition GPS class at the Air Force Academy, and I speak at conferences and events nationally on this topic. What's also interesting is I'm also starting to talk to corporations because they're hearing this message of this amazing workforce we have when we look at post 9/11 veterans. Amazing workforce with all this talent and rich with values and skills and character, and they don't know how to hire you. So I've got myself wedged into this position of saying, well, let me show you how to create a veteran program, an affinity program in your company, and onboard and retain veteran employees. And I don't get paid for this because, again, this is my way of saying thank you. When you do make that transition, this will be the book you'll want to read. And I am a fan of this book because 4,000 copies have been shared with your brothers and sisters on bases in Afghanistan and Japan, all over the world, and it makes a difference in how you will transition. So that's just my little 2-second commercial for that. So what I do is I focus on branding. And let me tell you a little bit about my career and my space, because then I'll tell you how my desire to serve and make the commitments and the sacrifices in the small way that I do fit in. A brand like the United States Air Force, the military, BMW, Walmart, these are all brands. What brands do is they set an expectation of an experience. Brands make us feel something. When we do marketing, we tell people what to do. buy now, act fast, call today, sign here, shop these hours. Those are marketing messages. But brands are where we tell people what to feel. And they are very strategically designed. Things that you think are just happening and you can't quite explain it is because somebody branded a company or organization or a person or an idea with an expectation of what they want you to feel. If I get behind the wheel of a BMW, I expect that I'm going to feel powerful and successful and confident and all these things. I don't know what's under the hood, and if they show me, I will nod politely, but I couldn't tell you what any of that means. Sounds like the guy in our last class probably could. But I know how it's going to make me feel. And if I am that customer, if I'm the target audience for that product, that's exactly what they want me to experience. Personal branding, the work that I do with people like you, is actually very similar, and it's very simple. I don't share complicated graphs and formulas and charts and all sorts of complicated things, but it's not easy. It is really not easy when you build a personal brand for yourself. It is not an easy journey. And I have taught classes where I've had very highly decorated officers literally start crying. And that took me a while to get comfortable with, because it's a very emotional topic. You have to define your value proposition. And it isn't based on your skills. It isn't based on what shows up on your MOS or what shows up on your resume. It's who you are. Your brand is who you are. It's also about judgment. And I like to say that I'm in the judgment business, but not in a religious sense. People judge us. And yeah, it sucks and it's not fair. And I was that mom who told my kids, it doesn't matter what other people think of you, it matters what's in your heart. Well, it doesn't. In the civilian world, when you get there, you will see very quickly, it definitely matters what I feel about you. And if you creep me out, or I think you're going to be a problem to onboard, or I don't want to partner or invest in you just because you don't make me feel like you're worth it, my money goes somewhere else. That perception, that judgment is a reality of how we live. The people that I help manage reputations for are affecting stock prices and big industries. But I'm also speaking to a body of talent that's going to go out into the world and make a difference. You need to be thinking about that too, that the way people perceive you definitely affects how they will assign you opportunity, resources, promotions, all of that. And it's not fair, so deal with that, but then take control over it. Personal branding, the program I love to teach to transitioning veterans, is all about control. Anybody here like control? Okay, well, why wouldn't you raise your hand? I love control, because control to me means choice, right? If I have the choice of where I want to work, or what projects I want to do, or what schooling I want to take advantage of, or what kind of clients I want to have hire me, then I'm in the position of power. So it's always about choice. And personal branding, being able to clarify your value proposition, why you're here, why you're valuable, why somebody else should be interested, puts you in the position of control. So put that in the back of your mind, because one day you will be making that transition. And it's very important to understand that control is going to feel foreign to you. I have a lot of feedback from former military who say it feels like the most terrifying experience. They feel unprepared, like that Marine on the field, feel totally unprepared. And I'm not here to talk about the TAPS program or transition GPS, because the military's job is not to teach you to be a civilian. The military's job is to teach you to be combat ready. I'm one of those people that's calling on the private sector to help you transition into the civilian environment. Branding is also about emotions, how we feel. Because the tactical side of leadership, the emotional side of leadership, they have to go together. If you're not credible, if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the stuff to be able to have a conversation, it really doesn't matter if I think you're wonderful. But if you have the stuff and I don't think you're wonderful, or if I don't find you compelling and relevant, I'm going to go to the person who makes me feel inspired, happy, safe, words like that. We're human beings. We have feelings. Men too. We have feelings. And it's really important to understand that, especially when you think about how the civilian world works. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. It's all about being intentional. There is nothing that I do without thinking it through first. Posting on Facebook. Who do I connect with on LinkedIn? How am I going to dress for this event? Am I going to wear the pin that I picked up at the George Bush Institute? Am I going to wear one from a board that I sit on? Everything I do is intentional because I am in the position to affect the way you're going to perceive me. If I show up here in a black suit with my hair pulled back, I'd look like the IRS. If I show up here in jeans with a t-shirt and a baseball cap, you're not going to take me seriously. So I think about every touch point in order to affect, and in some cases, control your perception. That's the work that I do. That's the place I get to play in. And again, some of my clients, I mean, they are the people that you're reading about in the paper. And I don't work with politicians or celebrities, so I want to put that out there. But I do work with some Broncos because I bleed orange and blue. And it's all about managing perception. So when I think about personal branding, I take clients through an exercise that starts with your current brand. And even though you're wearing a uniform and you're following into standards and you're in a system that is very organized for you and very structured, you have a brand. You have a personal brand. People feel something about you. You've earned a reputation. Are you the one who always raises his hand first? Are you eager and aggressive? Are you kind of a problem every time we see you in a class or in a meeting? You're the one that's always going to cause problems. That perception exists. Yeah, some of you are nodding your head. Okay, it's fixable. That perception exists. And if you didn't have this information before right now, you can't go back and do anything about what already happened, right? We can't go back in time. But your current brand is a benchmark to say, this is who I am. When I did this in 2008 for myself, boy, this was a real awakening because I had chased a lot of those awards and recognition and career advancements and titles and money and stuff because I love stuff. But I really hadn't paid attention to the reputation I had earned for myself, even though this was the industry I was in. And I burned bridges. I had definitely burned bridges, and I had stepped over people, and I had not been nice all the time or not been myself. I had had jobs where I tried to be someone else because the paycheck was good, and my dad, again, he said I was doing so great. And I would come home at night and feel like, oh, I just can't wait to be home because that's where I get to be myself. I wasn't being authentic. So my current brand was a real tough look at myself and say, wow, that's not exactly, I wouldn't be as proud of that person. But you get to have a desired brand. And that's where the control comes back. Because your desired brand is who you want to be. Who do you want to be? At the end of your life, which is a long way off, at the end of your life, who do you want to be remembered as? Why were you here? What difference did you make? Think about at your funeral, when people talk about you. And your friends and family, they're off to one side. But those of us standing around who served with you, or served for you, worked under you, in your next career, maybe you hired us. How did you make us feel? It's a heavy, heavy conversation. But remember I told you, it's a simple question, but it's not an easy one. It's probably the most powerful question you can ask yourself. Because when you can define how you want the end of your life to look, you can re-engineer yourself backwards. In 2008, this was the question that changed everything for me. Because I took a hard look at all the awards and the plaques and the stuff, and I said, but really, is that who I want to be remembered as? I mean, I have these two young men that I'm raising, my sons. Is that what I want them to remember me for? The people that I've mentored or inspired or spoken for, is that what the stuff? Oh, heck no. And it was when I started clarifying how I want my life to look, how I want to be remembered, assuming I've got this long runway, that made that episode in 2009 at that Broncos game so profound for me, because I had created a space for that. I knew that my legacy was going to be about giving back. It was going to be about serving someone. I didn't know if it was going to be women's groups, colleges, the underprivileged. I wasn't sure who. It never occurred to me it would be the military, because again, I have no connection. But I had created a space for that because I knew that's where I was headed. So your desired brand gives you that permission. It tells you that if I want to be seen as authentic and approachable and friendly, then I'm going to make really good eye contact when I speak. And I'm not going to wear something that makes me look stiff and unapproachable. And I'm going to be expressive, and I'm going to go out on a limb and talk about my story in a situation where y'all are pretty intimidating. But I'm sharing that confidently because I know where I'm going. And that's what your desired brand gives you. The other thing that's really important is your target audience. Who? Who needs to get you? And I love to talk about this in transition programs because all of a sudden then you start taking the universe of anyone who could possibly give you a paycheck down to these people. Who are the people that need to find you relevant? Who need to understand what you value and what value you bring? To companies, to businesses, to organizations, they have to know their target audience. BMW does not market its cars to my 21-year-old son. I mean, they can try, but he does not have the disposable income, nor does his mother, to afford him that sedan. They market to people who are their target audience. You're going to be marketing yourself after service to an audience that needs to understand you, that needs to get you, and that's going to reduce your work, and it's going to create much better results. So just to kind of finish up on the personal branding, once we've established the brand, then we go into the strategy. And that's where, even where you are right now, you can start thinking about this. What's your narrative? When you introduce yourself, how do you introduce yourself? Now, you might have protocols and certain formulas that you follow while you're a cadet and as you grow in your career here at the Air Force. But if you're out at Starbucks and you meet someone and they say, so what do you do in the Air Force? Are you going to say, well, ma'am, this is, and you're going to give your MOS? I'm a civilian. You lost me at ma'am, you know? Or are you going to say, well, this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I look forward to growing in my career at the Air Force, and post-military, this is what I'm going to be looking for. You can create a narrative for yourself that will make you compelling and relevant. Networking. I was fortunate to be at Quantico a few months ago and had 450 active duty Marines, and the program was on personal branding and networking. And they literally looked at me and said, please ma'am, don't make us network. Don't make us have to go up to strangers and introduce ourselves and ask for help. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Because in the civilian world, that's how business gets done. It's about relationships. It's about who you know and what they think about you. Your resume has to meet part of that. But who you are is very important in your career after the military. And I think it's honestly important while you're in the military as well. But your networking strategies, how you build those relationships and form those connections. We, in the last program, he talked about having friends that you're going to develop here at the academy for the rest of your life. Well, that's networking. And friendships and business professionals sometimes do intertwine. But your network, those people who will vouch for you, who will speak for you, who will endorse you and refer you, is a huge part of how you will build a career. So networking is very important. Social networking. And when I was actually writing the book, that was revealing to me, because I learned a lot about how the military culture supports or doesn't support use of social media, and a lot of the mistakes you all are making. So my advice would be, when you think about who you want to be for the rest of your life and how you're going to show up and how your service fulfills that, pay attention to what you're posting online, because it's permanent and it's public and it's always there. So those jokes you think are funny, not going to be so funny in 10 years when a hiring manager turns you down for it. So social networking is huge. Your image, your body language, how you present yourself, all comes from the person that you want me to believe you are. So that's the work that I do, and that's what I help other clients with. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, because everything I do revolves around my brand. And I've been challenged to decide or address whether we have a personal brand and a professional brand. I don't think so. I am the same person at home that I am when I'm in front of you or when I'm at the Pentagon. I am the same person. Now, I might look a little different because I got my hair in a scrunchie, no makeup on, but I'm going to treat my family and my neighbors and my community and the person who bags my groceries the same as I would treat you, because I know the reputation that I want for myself. I don't believe we separate them. And you're welcome to ask me questions about that later. Years ago, right after I decided to serve the military community, somebody asked me, they said, when you were 13, 14 years old, could you have imagined you would have been this person? And I took that as a lesson, and I'd ask you to think about it, even though some of you aren't, you're maybe 10 years past that. I'm a little more than 10 years past that. To think about when you were that young person, dreaming of what you were going to be in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. Look at yourself today and think, did you have any idea you were going to turn out like this? I was so different when I was that age. I was so insecure, and being really tall in Los Angeles where everybody is, movie stars, and I was working in the entertainment industry at the time, when I got out of college. I mean, everything bred insecurity. And I spent so many years, like I said, chasing the paycheck, chasing the title, chasing something better. I changed jobs all the time. My poor father was like, this doesn't make any sense. But I wish somebody could have shown me at 13 or 14 years old, this is who I get to be at, and I will not give you my age, but more than 13 or 14. It would have been so cool to know that. Look at yourself today and remember that young person who maybe looked on, laid on a bed and looked at the ceiling and thought, God, what's it going to be like to be 25? What's it going to be like to be 19? What's it going to be like to be 40? Look at yourself. Oh my gosh, what blessings we have. And I am so energized when I go through that, because my brand, my values have kept me anchored. The people close to me know that I make decisions because I stay true to those values. Your brands anchor in your values. I am very clear about what I would fight for and what I would pass up. It's the only way to make choices. Now, you all took an oath. I didn't take an oath. I make those choices for myself. Most civilians don't have the ability to take oath in their respected careers, but we're making choices. And if that choice can be because I know what the end result is, it makes it easier. I lead from abundance and generosity. It's my method. When I feel like I'm in a trough, when my business is slowing down, which as an entrepreneur is terrifying, that's my time to say yes. That's my time to say, absolutely, I'll go and speak and I'll waive my fee. I'll coach you and not charge you. I'll go and I'll donate books to a veteran service organization because they can't afford it. And I've done that periodically throughout my career, and it has never failed me. I'm not saying it's your strategy, it's definitely mine. When my business hit 5 years and I started to write the book, I knew that I was going to step out of my paying work. See, my paying work's over here, my service work is over here. I knew I was going to step out of it, but then when it happened, I went, I have to pay people, and I have overhead, and I'm not bringing in income. And I actually sent out an email, and I said, I'm celebrating 5 years as Lida 360, so I'm going to give away 5 programs. First 5 companies or organizations, and as soon as that happened, it starts the momentum again. Leading from abundance means I will never run out. I have never hit bottom. I have never run out of money or resources because there's always more. That's my philosophy. And this is part of what I get for that as my handsome husband. I get to work with military, those are my handsome kids. Sorry, it's very self-serving. But I get to do this because my paying clients pay me well for the work that I do. And I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful. It never has presented an opportunity where I've had to say no to a veteran organization yet. And I hope that never happens. So I've shared a little bit that my career definitely had stops and starts. I changed jobs every 2.5 years because there was something better. And it wasn't that I wasn't successful. I would just hit the ceiling, right? I would get the promotion, I would get the award, I would meet the goals, and I was bored. It never made sense. And as I mentioned, my father was going, oh, for goodness sake, you're supposed to stay with one company for 30 years. And I'm like, well, they don't give gold watches anymore. But it all made sense when I started my own company, because all that experience I had, all those different industries, I can now work across all those different industries. So there is no path that's linear. My two sons are taking very different paths. One of them is really struggling with, what am I going to do after school? What am I going to do after school? And it's like, you know what? You're going to do the first thing after school, and then you'll do the second thing after school. His brother is in the mining industry. That is what he wants to do for the rest of his life. Two totally different paths. Careers are not linear. And we see a lot with military that your first 5 years after service, you will have a lot of jobs. Not necessarily a good thing, but it's a reality. And 10, 15 years ago, that was a scary thing. Today, if you look at millennials, they're doing the same thing. So it is the reality that your career after the service will have stops and starts. It's just how we work. Leadership is an interesting word. Not only is it kind of my name, because it's Lida-ship. Leadership, yeah. I think I'm a good leader. I don't think I'm a good manager. And I think there's a big difference. I am not good at giving instruction. I'm not good at watching performance and evaluating it. I think I'm better at inspiring. As you grow in your career, understand the difference. Listen to people talk about the difference between a profession and a bureaucracy, between leadership and management, because they're not the same thing. I can touch people, I can affect change, I can inspire, but I'm really bad at tracking and detail and those types of skills. So I've had jobs where I was a manager and I was really bad at it because I wanted to be thinking vision. I wanted to be thinking about scope and impact and global, and they wanted me to fill out forms. So just because you have the ability to influence and the ability to motivate doesn't mean you're management material. Envisioning, have you ever heard of a vision board? Is it kind of a corny thing? A lot of people do this, and I always kind of curled my nose at it like I'm doing now, because people say, oh, you know, put the car that you want, and it's a bulletin board that you take, and you're supposed to pull out pictures and put words on that speak to what you want in your life. There's a movie and a book called The Secret that talks all about that, and I'm not going to go down that path too far, but I can tell you that I did that last year. And I put all these images of media publications I wanted to reach, veterans groups that I wanted to work with, corporate groups that I wanted to work with. And I put a dollar amount that I wanted to achieve. And my friends that were doing this visioning with me said, really, that's it? Like, we know what you spend on jewelry. That's not it. I said, no, that's a big number for me. And I kind of put it away. And I pulled it out at the holidays. And I'll be dang, I hit that number. If you set the intention, if you do it for the right reason, if you're authentic about your limitations and your potential, envision what you want the end to look like. Now, my number for this year, much bigger, by the way. But it is about visioning. It is about thinking beyond. And I understand in your role here, you are about learning technical competencies. You are about what's right in front of you. But one day, you will be on the other side. And that's a certain. You will leave the military one day. So what is your life going to mean there then? How does that work now? How does that fit together? I thought it might be helpful to just kind of talk about some tough choices, because my brand has really helped me make some tough choices. The first one came in 2009. My business was a year old. I was doing well, but certainly not where it is 7 years later. And I had an opportunity to do work for a financial firm. It was the summer of 2009. My husband had just been laid off, had 2 kids about to go to college, brand new business. I have this proposal, this firm wants to hire me. And I looked at Scott and I said, I'm gonna turn it down. And he looked at me and he said, are you kidding me? That's 3 mortgage payments. What are you talking about? You know, look, the economy is still bad. It wasn't right for me. And it was gut-wrenching to turn down that work. It might not sound like I mean, what you do is so much more important, but for me at the time, it was gut-wrenching because I had responsibilities. I had people I was accountable to. And the reasons I was turning it down, it didn't fit my passion. The work was not in my lane. It was something I could do, but it didn't inspire me. I was afraid that if I did the work and I was good at it, which I was pretty confident I would have been, that they would have referred me to people like them, and they weren't very nice people. This firm really wasn't very nice. And I knew that I would be turning down other work. And I did turn the project down, and I literally felt ill because I knew what I was giving up. But that concept of visioning came back, and I don't know if it was divine intervention, I don't know if it was the power of intention or the laws of attraction, but my phone started ringing. Had I taken that project, I would not have had the space later that year to hear the conversation at the Broncos game. I would have been consumed with that. I had another opportunity to do the same thing a couple weeks ago, right? So my business is bigger. I have people that I feed off of this business. I have overhead, I have offices, I have all this responsibility. And I got a corporate client that basically wanted to buy my time for 3 months. Huge contract, would have meant a lot of travel, and honestly, when I looked at my schedule, it would have meant a lot of saying no to work that I do at the Air Force Academy, that I drive down from Denver and teach these classes. And I, again, got that sick feeling of, oh my gosh, if I turn this down, like, what if something else doesn't come? What if that was the most I could make this whole year and then I'd be set for the year? And all these financial business decisions are going through my head, and I forgot the why. I forgot the desired brand. And when I got back there, and my husband, bless his heart, he's like Switzerland. He says, whatever you want to do, I'll support you. It's like, oh, come on, tell me what to do. You know, should I get on a plane for 3 months and make all this money and then come back and then I can pick up all this stuff? Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. Oh, it's a cursing and a bless. And I said, I'm going to turn it down. I said, I don't know why. I mean, I'll figure it out. I'll continue to say yes to the right things, but I can't step away from this for 3 months. And I did, and I typed out that email, and I read it, and I hit send, and I felt so relieved because I did make choices for myself now. I didn't just go back to that old pattern of chasing the dollar. And you know what never occurred to me? They came back with a modified schedule, more money for 1 month. I was like, well, I can do that. It never occurred to me that it was, I thought it was all or nothing. Like I turn down the contract or I take the contract. They're like, well, no, we want you, so we'll shrink up the contract and pay you more to make it enticing. So it wins. But it's making those really tough choices, right? I had another a few years ago where one of my clients, they're in the capital markets and they work specifically in sustainability. How do we create cultural shift in the financial markets as well as the natural resources to produce more with less? They hired someone who I couldn't more vehemently disagree with politically and almost ethically. This is a client that I did all their personal branding, I did their online positioning, I did their corporate branding, and they send me an email, say, we need you to come to San Francisco, and we need you to onboard this very senior person who I knew very well from the media, and we need you to teach him about the brand and help get his brand up to speed. Wow. I went, could it be anyone else? Please, I'll take it. Anyone else, just not this person. And that was, again, a moral decision because I don't necessarily want to be aligned with someone like that. Now, he had never done anything illegal, but some of his positioning really ruffled me the wrong way. And I thought it over. I said, well, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other, and I'm just not going to leap. I'm just going to go cautiously because I can always back out if this gets uncomfortable. So I went to San Francisco, and I met with him. And first thing he said to me is, I want to address any of your concerns, anything you've seen in the media, any questions that you have, let's just get them out on the table. And he was so authentic, so transparent, so forthcoming. I still left there going, I would never want to endorse him, but I learned so much about myself because I pushed myself into a place of fear. I pushed myself into something that was uncomfortable. And we talked about that, I think it was at the opening, that they were talking about the concept of unknown and fear. There's a lot of unknown and fear. Even though you will plan, you will predict as much as possible. General Dempsey recently talked in New York, and I got to be there, and he said, you know, the first 10 minutes of a mission or strategy, then it's about adapting, it's about improvising, it's about figuring it out. You're going to have to trust yourself. If it's a no, you're going to know it's a no. I've had many times where I've said no, not taking on that client, not going there, not pushing myself. I don't need to learn that. I actually took on a 26-year-old client recently. And my assistant looked at me when she saw the proposal and went, I'm sorry, what? Like, we work with titans of industry. And I learned a lot from him. I really did. And I appreciated his vulnerability. And I was willing to stretch myself. Because fear for me is a daily thing. Fear, I don't know how often you experience fear. I experience it on a daily basis. And it's that fear that I convert into adrenaline. I convert into excitement because it allows me to do what I do. The people that I've worked with, like I said, are very successful. They're successful on paper, and in some cases they're successful in their heart. Often I get asked by the media, what do very successful people share in common? And I think generosity is a big part of it. Yes, some of my clients write very big checks to big foundations and organizations. In some cases, they're attached to it personally. In other cases, it's what their PR team tells them looks good, and so they write those checks. But I have known some of the most generous, loving, appreciative, helpful people who want to just keep giving. They want to give. And this leading from abundance, this giving and not looking to take, seems to work for very successful people. Try saying yes more than you say no. Try giving it away instead of selling it. You know, I have overhead. I have people I have to pay salaries for, but I give so much more away than I take, and I take a lot. And it works, and it works. And the people that I work with tend to share a lot of that same philosophy. The concept of love versus respect. I often thought that very successful business people were concerned about respect. But ask yourself, ask the people around you if they feel safe with you, would they rather be loved or respected by the people they're leading? Half the time it comes back love. And I'm talking military people I work with, business people I work with, and it surprised me. But as human beings, we are often driven by one or the other or both. And it can affect the way we make choices, the way we show up. Do you want to be loved or respected? What does that mean for you? And I love that this was mentioned in the last program, and I pointed it out. I said, I have this on my slide, because failure is an option, very much so. And I wrote an article for military.com saying failure can be a very possible option in your transition. You can have many stops and starts. You might start a business because you want to be independent and own your own future, and it can fail miserably. It's what you do with it. I have made bad choices. I have invested in online platforms I thought were going to be the next whatever. And I can't even remember what the website name is anymore. But that's risk. And if you're not taking risk, you're not taking chances. If you're not leaning into fear and allowing it to convert to adrenaline or learning or experience, then you're not living. You know, we get one shot to be here. One time we get to go around this thing called life. Unless you believe in the Shirley MacLaine stuff. But I believe you get one shot. And I'm going to take it to its fullest. And I am going to lean into fear. I'm going to do things that scare me. And over time, if I continue to do them, I'm going to do them better. But failure is always an option. And I appreciate that. I don't move towards it, but I definitely appreciate it. And I encourage you to think about it too. If any of you are interested, and this is the URL, I did a gratitude project a few years ago that caused me to really look at fear. I was given the mandate or the idea by someone I really respect who said the real place I'm going to tap into abundance and leadership is to start putting out of myself what isn't comfortable. And I was charged with having 7 days to go out to complete strangers that she said I would know who they were. What does that mean? And I had to share with them what I was grateful for and give them an envelope that had money in it. My son was mortified that I was giving money away. I said, it wasn't that much money. And I did this for 7 days. I went up to strangers and I said, excuse me, if I may just, I am doing a gratitude project and I would love to share this with you, and I'm very grateful for all that I have in my life, and I just want to share that. Only one person said no, which was an old lady. It turned out that the older ladies were not as friendly to this idea. Younger men, very friendly to the idea. There were a couple times I was like, no, not that kind of gratitude project. But I'm someone who speaks for a living. I'm not afraid of talking to people, but this pushed me way out of my comfort zone. And if you're interested, it's on my blog, and I talk more about that. Balancing act, I think I've shared with you a little bit, that it is about costs and reward for me. Coming here and doing this for 2 days means it's 2 days that I'm not in my office generating income, that I'm not marketing my business, that I'm not talking to potential clients. And I do this because this to me is so much more personally gratifying. And I get so much from working with you. I truly do. And if I get to go on Facebook or LinkedIn or talk to a corporate audience next week and tell them about this, and someone in the room goes, well, I might want to help veterans. How do I help the military? Then other people are doing this too. And I get to talk to corporations who say, well, how do we hire this 2.6 million people that you're telling us are such a great workforce? And I get to start that conversation. It's all about risks and rewards. It's all about cost. Everything costs. You have 1 hour. We can't get back the past hour. So I'm hoping this wasn't a waste of your time, but we can't get it back. So what are you going to do with it? It's all about taking those choices and those chances. So I want to give you my top 10, and then we'll have some time for questions. I would love to see you consider giving more than you take. Saying yes a little bit more. Just putting it back in, filling it back up. If you're married, you know you have to fill the other person's emotional tank. You have to give to the other person. Try random acts of kindness. Amazing what you can do when you light someone else's day up, you know, and just pay that forward. Give thanks. I'm not even talking in a religious sense. I'm just saying be grateful. We have so much to be grateful for. And I look at all of you, and I am so grateful for you. I am so grateful that you raised your hands to do what you do. Because I go back to my life, and I don't have the stresses that you have. When I talk to my veterans, I say, you know, people don't shoot at me when I go to work most days. I'm very grateful. And this is my way of saying thank you. So find a way to say thank you. Find a way to give thanks. Always be learning. Those situations that scare you or push you beyond your breaking point or challenge what you think you're capable of, that could be a breakthrough. That could be an opportunity for you to learn something. And it's those times in my career when I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone, when I've done something that inside I was going, oh, I can't do this, that have caused me to get to a new level. And then all of a sudden the horizon looks different. Listen. And I'm a talker, but my mother always said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen more than you talk. People will tell you how they can help you. They will tell you what they need. They will tell you how to be part of their community if you listen. And when I teach networking classes, it's all about listening to other people because they will tell you how they can give you jobs if you listen to them. And teach. Each of you has something to offer. Are you giving back? Are you sharing either with the other cadets that you serve with or in your community? Could there be some young little league team that could benefit from your leadership? They're going to look at you like gods because you're so big and powerful to them. Teach other people and you'll learn about yourself. Dream. When I was writing the book, that came up over and over. Don't forget to tell people to dream. I said, military people? Yeah, especially military people. My good friend who runs the veteran hiring and onboarding program for Disney, he said, don't forget to dream. Tell the veterans that you're speaking to, the active duty, that they need to dream. Have a future, have a vision. What's here right now is, granted, taking a lot of your attention, but there's something on the other side. And if you dream it and you vision it, you can make it happen. Accept challenge and failure. Hey, it's not fun, but it happens, and failure is an option. Challenge can be a learning opportunity. And celebrate success, not just your own, but the success of others. And I know in the military you're taught to push success, or, and not take credit for things. But if you do something good, let's kind of create a safe little place that maybe you can give yourself an attaboy or an attagirl. Celebrate success of your own and those you serve alongside, because this life is hard. And if we do something good, I want to hear about it. Embrace fear, because it can be converted to adrenaline. It can be converted to excitement. It doesn't have to be paralyzing. And stay authentic. And I know that sounds really trite, but there's one of you. And I would hate to think you're going to go through some of what I went through or some of my clients have gone through of trying to be somebody you're not. That feeling in your stomach that says this doesn't feel right, that just gets worse. If you can figure out who you are, why you're here, why you were put here in this class at this moment, in this institution at this time, in this country, in this year, why you're here, then you can take advantage and create a path to the reputation and the brand that you want for yourself. And it all falls into place. And that part is easy. But you have to stay true to yourself. And if you can figure that out at your age, that's a lot easier. So there are a million ways of reaching me. If you're on social networking, I'm on every social platform. If you're on Facebook, we have a great conversation going at yournextmissionbook.com. My website, I'm just going to tell you, has a ton of free information. So if you want to follow up on any of what I talked about, if you're thinking about it, all of the articles from military.com, all of the videos, all of my stuff funnels into lida360.com/veterans. And I've built that out specifically for you. And share it, print it, whatever you want to do with it. I hope my story has in some way caused you to think about something a little bit differently. This was uncomfortable for me because I'm used to teaching you how to do it, and now you've asked me to come in and talk about my story. But I appreciate your letting me be authentic and go into something that was a little scary for me. And I hope you found some value, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have or make myself available. Thank you so much for your service. Not all at once, please. Please.
So for, say, a career officer, what do you see as the major things that hold them back in the transition to, you see a lot of generals, for example, colonels also, and they transition for a long period of time. They get disconnected from sense of purpose because they are so military. So what do you see holds them back, and how do you deal with that?
So the question being, with the senior officers, what kind of holds them back in their transition? I actually don't think it's that much different than I do with junior folks that I work with, because I have coached some very highly decorated, very senior officers, as well as folks who serve for 4 years. The culture that you're coming out of is so unique and so specific. You're going into a culture that doesn't have any of those same rules. So I might say that civilian culture is more about relationship, but that's a huge statement. The military, for instance, is very values-driven, right? We talk a lot about the values, integrity, service before self, all of that. In the corporate world, sometimes values. As marketing people, we're really good at putting vision statements and branding statements and framing them around the office. Some companies don't live by those. That's a challenge. Talking about yourself, the concept of networking, the concept of knowing that it is about who you know. When you come over to the civilian side, it's very relational. It's not as much about your technical expertise. In certain careers it will be, but even then, if you're not somebody I think is going to fit in with my company, I'll find the next person with the same technical expertise. One of the funny examples I have, there's this a colonel that I'm coaching who went into a very large company after service. And he was given a huge team, a civilian team that he was going to manage. And he called me one day and he goes, "You are not going to believe what just happened." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Lida, I used to walk into a room and everyone stood up when I walked in." He goes, "Now I walk into a meeting and these kids have their feet on the table." It's like, okay, well, let's go over that again. And he said, and we were given a project that we were going to take from inception to completion. And he uses words like this. I said, okay, so what happened? He goes, well, we had our first meeting, and I got everyone around the room. He goes, I used to go around and I could just tell everybody what to do and they would do it. But now they want me to go around and get everybody's buy-in on the project. So I did that. Well, then a couple months later, we had to get together with another department because we had to understand how they feel about the project. And he's telling me this story with all this animation going, so then we had to have that meeting. He goes, and I'm sitting there going, we're losing time while we talk about how everybody feels about this project. 3 more meetings later of talking about whether you have any questions. Well, how do you feel about where we're going? And do you have any, are you on board with all of this? He goes, we're asking everybody to collaborate, and then they killed the project. All that work was a waste. He goes, I could have taken them from here to here. It isn't about efficiency in the civilian world. It's a mindset shift. We're about collaboration. We're about relationship. We're about people getting along. Of course, there's got to be profit involved. Otherwise, they're called a nonprofit. But it is very relational, and that's oftentimes a disconnect. Those are just some of the examples. Please.
Would you say you talked about how you have made decisions in your life based on your values and contracts with you. Is there any one value that you would say is by far the most important, and if so, why?
To me?
Yes.
Gratitude. Gratitude is the most important to me. Yeah, I mean, every night I say what I'm grateful for. And it starts with my kids, it starts with my country, it starts with being able to do this, my health, everything. It's what anchors me. But that's not everybody's value. So your values are yours, and they might have some of the same words, but when you consider what your values are, that's part of this personal branding process, it gets really tricky because it can't be all sorts of values. And when I do these trainings with either active duty or transition, and I hear integrity, honor, duty, commitment, it's like, okay, so that's everyone in the room. What makes you different? What makes you special? Your values anchor how you're going to show up. And if I don't show up in a way that's gracious or that is grateful, then people around me know something's off. And that extends into a whole bunch of different ways that I show up. But the values that you anchor onto, you have to be crystal clear on what they mean. And they often mean different things. I was on a base a few months ago, and one of the guys said integrity was his value. I said, okay, I get that. Makes perfect sense. What does integrity mean to you? And he said, ma'am, integrity is doing the right thing. Okay, I'm still with you, but go further. Well, it's doing the right thing when I'm told. Okay, so that's where you and I go like this. Another guy at a corporate, a lot of corporations have veteran employees, and so they bring me in to work with the veteran employees. And he said honesty. He said his value, everything he does stems from honesty. I said, wow, okay. And he talked about what honesty means, and it is, he said, without question, I will always tell the truth. Always tell the truth. The people around me know they can rely on that. They can ask me tough questions. I will always be straightforward. He goes, I used to be candid, now I'm more straightforward. But he goes, it's all about honesty. I said, do you have kids? Yes, ma'am, a 12 and a 13-year-old. I said, how did you handle Santa Claus? And he goes, well, that's not an honesty thing. It's like, okay, all right, I'll let you have that one, because that was kind of unfair. I said, what if we walked outside and there were news crews, and they wanted to ask about a rumor that they heard was going on in the company, and this was a secure facility. I said, how would you address that? He'd be fired if he addressed a news crew. So how honest is he willing to be? Your job is going to be to take those words that you have for your values and get as clear as you possibly can. Because personal branding is not about perfection. It's not about being flawless. It's about being consistent. And he could have come back and said, he actually just stopped, but he could have come back and said, well, in that case, I would respect the contract that I signed with my company and defer my honesty. I would accept that. But if you have a place where your values can fracture, then you might want to think about whether it's the right value, whether it's the right word. Because values are, they're pretty strong. They don't change over time, they mature over time. The one thing that can disrupt your value set, in my experience, has been a traumatic life event. So people who've been through something really traumatic can definitely shake them off their foundation. I have worked with some very severely disabled, service-disabled veterans who definitely, their value foundations have been shaken very, very severely. But the values that you are living by today are probably going to mature and evolve over the rest of your life. Just get clear. So when you're making those choices, do I want to go that path or that path? Do I want to work with that person or that person? Am I willing to take a risk on that person? You at least can anchor it to who you are and what you believe in. Please.
I guess I'd like to contribute in terms of maybe where the cadets are coming from, and the core of this 2 days annual session is that it is a seminar on character development, and I just can't help but, speak up a little bit, because you're calling them values and what they value, and these cadets are going forth in their career with character development, that same integrity and honesty, and then it does come into this team playing.
Right.
That is where somewhere they have to evolve if they get out, after their commitment or after their pilot training commitment or something. But the things that you outlined earlier are wonderful. For the cadets, it's to find your current brand, where you've been coming, where you came in here as a freshman, as a dually, and then how you're learning and the mentoring that's going on, and then define what your desired brand is as you're coming out and as you're graduating and into the different career fields. And you talked about, like, they're coming out as technical specialists, but they're also coming out as leaders, that difference between leaders and managers, and then have to do both and have much more leadership development. And you talked about whatever seminar you went in the last hour, and the last speaker here was clearly on what your character is and how you're watching out for your mates, for their backs. When you talk, and I just love how it parallels for the work that they're doing and that they will be doing in the next 4, 6, 8, 20 years before they make the transition, but to maintain that consideration of character, but then to be able to define it well, like, yes, it's honesty and integrity, because if you're confronted by the media when you walk out the door, you have to have that integrity to be part of your company,
Right.
You can't, if you're a Boy Scout, if you're in some other, any nonprofit or YMCA, or it's like you walk out and the YMCA is squandering their money, or, and issues of honesty or sexual assault and all these things, What your honesty means is what you can address to the media, or what you have to defer to someone higher, because you kind of know your position. But so that desired brand is what they'll come out as, and that powerful question, what kind of a leader do you want to be remembered as? Like, the authenticity to be, not a rubber stamp,
Right.
but authentic as an Air Force Academy graduate, commissioned officer. It's very powerful. I don't know.
Thank you.
The Army, West Point has a long history and a long legacy, and so the U.S. Naval Academy. And when we were flying here and coming through the airport, getting our baggage among skiers in Denver, somebody said, somebody that we sat next to said to us, oh, we're going to a conference in Air Force Academy, and they said, oh, where's the Air Force Academy? The Air Force Academy is still young enough that, people that don't have a military connection, they still don't know where the Air Force Academy is, because it's not around Washington, D.C., and it doesn't have that visibility. And that is part of your character and part of your branding to go forth as an Air Force Academy graduate. It's a very powerful thing.
Thank you.
For that respect, and all these, so your factors, everything fits. If you think that she's talking about you're getting out in 6 years, assignments, and I wanted to go to grad school, or I wanted to have a joint spouse assignment here, but I can't, so now I'm getting out, and now I have to make those difficult decisions, whether it's in your job or a transition. Then you are, but you are, all 1,000 of you, or 4,000 of you, you are unique. So there is that, places for good thought, or appreciate the words, and I hope the cadets all see that part too. Inspiring people rather than directing, because directing is managing, that's the easy part. But
Not for me, but.
they're going to have a day because, time is money.
Yeah.
They'll be managers, but they'll also be inspiring. And we have to have leadership and the vision, for our services in the next generation.
And I appreciate you're making that connection. This is really about who you're going to be, who you are, who you want to be, not necessarily what, because the what will change, the what will grow, the what will, opportunities will come and opportunities will go, but who you are is when you look yourself in the mirror and you're proud of what you see back. And it is very much about character, and it is about leadership. It's about taking risks, and it's about being afraid and saying, but this is who I am. Who I am is to lean into these things instead of run away, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Like my husband's second career after 24 years in the Air Force was a Boy Scout executive, and he still has that integrity.
Mhm.
It's still like integrity above self.
Yeah. And what's really tough, I think, for a lot, kind of going to your point too, a lot of civilians don't share that. I mean, you're going to encounter people when you transition, and I'm making big statements about the military and about the civilian.
Or make it look good.
Yeah, we don't come necessarily from the culture that you do. Now, sometimes our parents taught us, or we learned it in our religious affiliations, or we learned values and character in our schools. But you're going to be working alongside people like this colonel that I worked with. These kids had their feet on the desk at a business, at a business meeting, and he thought that was so disrespectful. It is what it is. You can choose to try to fight that. You can accept it. You can worry about yourself, but it's going to be different. And that's a reality that we have as civilians when we bring you in. And it's definitely a reality that you'll experience when that day comes that you make the transition as well. Please, Scott.
So last year, the Air Force downsized, and a lot of my classmates, suddenly found themselves potentially being forced out.
Right.
And everybody in my year group jumped on LinkedIn, right? But what are some of these other things that military people aren't doing to prepare for, with regards to social media and things like that?
Right.
What are some things you see military people haven't considered before they got up?
I would think the two things are definitely social networking, only because it's free and it's global. Like when you think about a marketing ROI, it's huge. And then in-person networking, relationship building, knowing people, exchanging business cards. The day you leave the military, you make business cards. I mean, you just do. You have to, because you will network with people. But the social networking piece, even 18 months out, I've coached a lot of folks 18 months out from their separation, getting on LinkedIn, starting to talk about what they're looking for, and it's not a resume. LinkedIn is not a resume. It's a place where business people come together to collaborate. So I'm connected with people in the White House on LinkedIn. I'm connected with high school friends on LinkedIn. I'm very careful about who I connect, and I blog a lot about social networking. So if you're interested in how to use those tools, go through my website. You'll find the articles, and I make it very simple. But if you, let's say you transitioned out 5 years ago, and you still got a picture of you in a uniform on your LinkedIn page, that hiring manager is going to go, yeah, hasn't really left. It's things like that. I mean, I still see the pictures with the big scary guns on LinkedIn. And you got to understand who is on LinkedIn. Hiring managers, recruiters are using social networking. 80 to 90% of them use social networking, whereas 80 to 90% of job seekers use job boards. So we're doing totally different conversation. Social networking and in-person networking. Anyone you meet, you have no idea how far down the path that person could come back into your life and be valuable. And so having a relationship strategy where you're going to offer something of benefit, of benefit and take is huge. And don't be uncomfortable. I mean, I get that the concept of asking for help and showing, vulnerability and all that, it might make you uncomfortable, but that's how we're doing it on the civilian side. That's how we're growing our careers. Please. What's that? Oh, we have 5 minutes. So those would be the two, social networking. Even image and body language and stuff like that, which I coach on, that's easy to learn. That's a cheat sheet. Please.
I'm a former career Army officer, made the transition, thought I had a good resume, looked back at it, man, it was really militarized. The people here that will eventually transition,
Yep.
they've had responsibility far in excess of their civilian peers, leadership responsibility. Though, as I continue to look at resumes of former military folks, they struggle. It's really hard for them to civilianize those. What advice would you give to the people in this room as to what they can do to understand how to best posture their resume for the civilian sector?
Great question. I will go on record as saying I'm not a fan of resumes. So I'm very public with that, and I've written about why I don't know a lot of civilian employers who necessarily hire off of them. Now, if you're looking at the Booz Allens or the big companies, yes, your resume will get uploaded into a database, keyword searches have to match, or it does not pass go and collect $200. But a lot of companies, a lot of industries are looking at the resume as a reflection of what you've done in the past. So it is a list of your previous experience. The thing it doesn't tell me is who you are. And it doesn't tell me what you're going to be able to do for me going forward. For that reason, I use it as a tool in the toolkit, but I think that the branding and the reputation and all these other touch points really come into play more. There are professional resume writing services that some of you will get exposed to. I would be a very smart consumer as you go through that, because I've heard some great stories. You're nodding your head. I've heard some nightmare stories. It isn't just about demilitarizing or civilianizing a resume. If you're a logistics specialist in the Air Force and you want to come work in personnel or HR, you have to be able to make that translation. You have to make it so that that hiring manager, who has no idea what an MOS is, has to be able to see what that is. I worked with one guy who I met here at the TAPS program, who was a logistics specialist, managed the trucks. Sorry, this is my civilian coming out. And he's like, I don't know what I want to do next. And I said, well, what do you like to do? And he goes, I like to move fleets. And I said, how about school buses? And he goes, well, I could do that. And now I've got him connected into the state transportation district. So you have to be able to make it easy for the person looking at that resume to know what it means. And it isn't just about taking one word and switching it out. But if you were like a cook in the Air Force, that means you were in charge of budgets, you managed procurement, you maybe managed staff. So what are the skills? What are the qualities and the traits that you're learning? How do those come across to the civilian side? But it's not enough. You have to still have the narrative that says, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I bring that's valuable, this is what I'm passionate about, this is where I see myself and how I can add value to your company. That typically doesn't get communicated on a resume. And for that reason, I typically, I'm not a huge fan, but for the big defense contractors, the big firms, yes, they will use those algorithms to just make sure that you have the skills and the qualifications. Did you want to add something?
Well, cover letter.
Well, the cover letter, yeah. There's hit and miss on how many recruiters and hiring managers really read those carefully. And I've made the mistake before of telling people just put all the why in the cover letter, and then they write 4-page cover letters. So my approach is to say, have a robust LinkedIn page. Have people in the community who know who you are. Get introduced to the company. All these touch points and a resume and a cover letter all of a sudden create a different looking platform. If you're just pushing a resume out 30, 50 a day, it's a numbers game, and getting a job is not a numbers game.
And AOG is, as far as networking, don't forget your AOG, Association of Graduates, wherever you are, because you could have come in from Idaho and stationed here and stationed in Seymour Johnson and where you want to end up. So contact your statewide, your AOGs, because there'll be a lot of help.
Thank you. Well, I think we're out of time, so I'm here tomorrow as well. If you have any questions, go to my website, take anything you want, download it, share it. Thank you again for your time.